9 languages. Reginald Hawthorne's laugh was not loud, but it filled the cavernous boardroom, a dry, dismissive rasp that echoed off the floor-to-ceiling glass. My dear, this is the Grayson Global Fellowship, not a party trick competition. He leaned back in his leather throne, a chair that cost more than her family's car, the city's skyline a cold, glittering canvas behind him. Miss Okoro, is it? Across the 30-foot, mirror-polished mahogany table, 17-year-old Amara Okoro stood motionless, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She had not been offered a seat. We are here to award a $250,000 scholarship, Hawthorne continued, not to be entertained by flights of fancy. The air in the 50th floor boardroom of the Grayson Foundation Tower was thick with the scent of old money, lemon oil polish, and the faint, metallic chill of recycled air. It was so quiet she could hear the digital tick of the antique-style clock on the wall. Amara had been standing in the same spot for 10 minutes, a silent statue in her one good blazer, a $30 find from a thrift store that she had steamed meticulously in her bathroom this morning. The wool, she noted, was pilling slightly at the cuffs. She was the only person of color in the room, save for a junior board member at the far end, Mr. Al-Jamil, who seemed intensely focused on the legal pad in front of him, as if his life depended on not looking up. The other finalists, 3 boys and 1 girl from academies whose names were synonymous with wealth, had been interviewed and dismissed. She had watched them from the hallway. They were all offered coffee, sparkling water, and a comfortable plush seat at the table. They had chatted easily with the board, a conversation among equals. Amara had been told to wait by the door by a silent assistant, and then, after the last boy left, was simply gestured to the end of the great table. To stand, like a defendant. Reginald Hawthorne, chairman of the Grayson Foundation, represented everything she was not. His suit was a whisper of dark wool that probably cost more than her mother's last 6 months' rent. His silver hair was immaculate, his power so absolute it was a physical presence, a drop in barometric pressure. His family had founded this. His name was carved in the granite lobby downstairs. He turned to the woman on his right, Cynthia Vance. Miss Vance, Hawthorne said, his brief amusement fading. The floor is yours. Cynthia Vance was sharp, ambitious, and dressed in a steel-gray suit that seemed tailored from razor blades. She had the hungry, restless look of someone who had clawed her way to this table and would defend her spot ferociously. She opened a binder and, without looking at Amara, began to speak, her voice clipping the silence. Amara Okoro, 17 years old, applicant for the Grayson Global Fellowship, GPA 4.0, SAT 1580. Vance's voice was crisp, professional, and utterly devoid of warmth. She was the one who had discovered the problem. Amara could see the faint, triumphant tension in her shoulders. This was a kill she was proud of. And here, she said, tapping a page with a perfectly manicured nail, is the anomaly. Miss Okoro, in your personal essay, you claim fluency in 9 languages. She read them out as if they were counts in an indictment, her voice laced with incredulity. English, Spanish, French, Mandarin Chinese, Modern Standard Arabic, Russian, German, Japanese, and Swahili. A few board members shifted. An elderly woman, Mrs. Harrington, adjusted her pearls, her expression one of polite, pitying disbelief. She looked at Amara as one might look at a stray cat that had wandered into a gala. This is, of course, a remarkable claim, Vance continued, her tone implying laughable. So remarkable, in fact, that we ran a background check, as is standard for all finalists. She finally lifted her eyes and pinned Amara with a look of cold discovery. You attend Northwood Public High, in the district known as the Ridges. Your official school records show you have only taken classes in Spanish. You have no registered tutors. You have never, not once, traveled outside of the state, let alone the country." Vance paused for effect, letting the impossibilities stack up. "Your family's income." "That is enough, Cynthia," Hawthorne interrupted, his voice smooth. He gave Amara a look of false, paternal disappointment, the kind a headmaster gives a promising student caught cheating. "The point is, Miss Okoro, there is a profound discrepancy. A fabrication of this magnitude is audacious. Frankly, it's an insult to the other finalists and to this board." Amara kept her breathing even. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6. She had prepared for this. She had known this wall was coming. She just hadn't expected it to be so high, or for them to be so pleased to have found it. She thought of her mother, already at her second job, her hands raw from cleaning chemicals. She thought of the flickering light in her kitchen that they couldn't afford to fix. This scholarship wasn't a prize. It was the entire path. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not shake. It carried across the polished wood, clean and clear. "I did not lie on my application. Every word is true." Hawthorne's eyebrow arched. His amusement was gone, replaced by a flicker of irritation. This was not the part where the charity case was supposed to argue. She was supposed to cry, apologize, and disintegrate. "Miss Okoro," he said, his tone hardening, the false warmth vanishing. "I suggest you consider your position. We are prepared to handle this quietly. You can withdraw your application citing personal reasons. No one needs to know. It will save us all a great deal of embarrassment. Your embarrassment and ours for having mistakenly selected you." "What would I be withdrawing from?" Amara asked, her hands still clasped. "A competition I won, or an interrogation I was never warned about?" The silence that followed was sharp, broken only by Cynthia Vance's sharp intake of breath. Vance's mouth thinned. She was not used to being challenged, especially not by a child in a thrift store blazer. "You are judging my application, sir," Amara said, holding Hawthorne's gaze. "An application that got me to this final stage over hundreds of others, from schools you approve of. Will you not at least hear the person who wrote it?" Hawthorne's patience snapped. He laughed again, that same dry rasp, and it was uglier this time. "Hear what? Recite the Chinese alphabet? Miss Vance, look at her." He gestured, an open palm of dismissal, as if she were a piece of evidence. "She is from the ridges. No resources, no travel, no family connections. It is statistically, socially impossible." The word hung in the chilled air. Impossible. A junior board member at the far end of the table looked down, his face flushing with a faint, useless shame. Mrs. Harrington, the pearl-necked woman, stared intently at a water glass, suddenly fascinated by its clarity. Mr. Al-Jamil, silent until now, finally looked up. His dark eyes rested on Amara with an unreadable expression, a mix of frustration and something else. Resignation? He had, she realized, seen this exact scene before. Hawthorne had said the quiet part aloud. He had drawn the line, not between truth and lies, but between his world and hers. He had just confirmed that, to him, her only crime was her origin. And for that, she was guilty before she even spoke. The weight of Hawthorne's words settled over the boardroom. Statistically, socially, impossible. It was a verdict delivered before a trial, a sentence passed on her zip code. Amara took a slow, deliberate breath. She felt the familiar cold weariness that always came when she hit this wall. It was the same wall she hit when the honors AP teacher, Mr. Davies, lost her enrollment form 3 years in a row, smiling blandly and saying, "Maybe next year, Amara, these classes are very demanding." It was the same wall she hit when the debate coach told her she was too aggressive and unrefined, while the boys from the wealthy part of town, saying the exact same things, were passionate and commanding. It was a wall of soft, smiling faces and politely closed doors, and for the first time, it had a name. Reginald Hawthorne. But something else rose with the weariness, a cold, clear anger, not the hot, screaming kind that they expected from the Ridges, not the kind that would get her labeled hostile and thrown out by security. It was the quiet, dense, heavy kind, the kind that fueled her 3 a.m. study sessions, the kind that had allowed her to master Japanese verb conjugations in a month. "Mr. Hawthorne," Amara said, her voice still quiet, but now edged with the chill of the room. "You have just explained why this fellowship exists, or at least why it claims to find talent where no one else is looking. That's what the plaque in your lobby says, the one with your grandfather's name on it." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You've found it. You just don't believe it." Hawthorne's face, usually a mask of patrician calm, tightened. His eyes went flat. He had offered this girl a quiet way out, a kindness, and she had thrown it back at him, quoting his own family's gospel. She had, in his boardroom, in front of his board, accused him of failure. Before he could speak, Cynthia Vance intervened, sensing her boss's fury and seeing her own opening. "This is not a philosophical debate, Miss Okoro," she snapped, her professionalism sliding to reveal the attack dog beneath. "This is about material misrepresentation, a legal matter, and it has consequences." She picked up a new set of folders, bound in Grayson Foundation blue. "Your application was not just an essay. It included translation samples, as you know, a test of your fluency. As part of the finalist vetting, we forwarded these samples to 3 of our key corporate partners for preliminary internship placement." Vance's voice took on a note of triumph. She was back on solid ground. She had paper. She had proof. She smiled, a thin, satisfied line. "Global Strategies Incorporated," she read, "a leader in tech fabrication. Their reviewer found your Mandarin translation of a tech prospectus unintelligible and riddled with amateur errors. Court. They specifically noted that your attempt at technical language was laughable." "The Diplomatic Institute of Washington," she continued, "rejected your French and Arabic samples. The reviewer, a Dr. Henri Bisset, noted fundamental grammatical errors and a grotesque misunderstanding of formal tone. He wondered if you had used an internet translation tool." She saved the worst for last, her voice dripping with prosecutorial zeal. "And the World Aid Initiative, one of our largest beneficiaries, they had this to say about your Russian sample." She held the paper up, as if it were contaminated. "They called it a barely literate joke and an insult to the language. They said it sounded like a machine translation run through a blender. They have formally requested we terminate your candidacy." Each accusation was a public stab, designed to make her bleed out, right here, on the expensive carpet. Amara could feel the stares of the board, the pity now hardening into contempt. Mrs. Harrington was shaking her head slowly, her pearls clicking. This wasn't just a lie. It was a lie that had embarrassed the foundation. Hawthorne leaned forward, his voice softening into a false, paternal tone. "Amara, child, it's a disaster. It's not just your reputation. You've damaged ours. You've made us look foolish. We all make mistakes when we're young. We want to help you. But you have to let us. Admit the mistake. Apologize for the time you've wasted. Don't compound this." It was then that Amara did something that stunned the room. She smiled. It was not a bitter smile. It was not a defeated smile. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated knowledge. It was the smile of someone who had just been handed the exact weapon she needed. The smile of a chess player who had just watched her opponent fall into a trap she'd set 6 moves ago. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said, her voice polite. "May I ask a few questions about these reviews?" Vance frowned. "What kind of questions?" "Just for clarity," Amara said. "Global strategies. When, exactly, did they find my sample unintelligible? Was it before or after they received my zip code for the background check?" Vance's eyes widened slightly. That's irrelevant." "And the Diplomatic Institute," Amara continued, her voice gaining a strange, hypnotic strength. "Did they find the grotesque errors in my French and Arabic before or after my school transcript confirmed I wasn't from a private academy?" "This is baseless," Vance said, her face flushing. "You are questioning the integrity of our partners." "I am questioning their methodology," Amara replied, "and the World Aid Initiative, the experts who reviewed my Russian sample. The ones who found it an insult. I'm just curious. What are their credentials? Are they native speakers? Do any of them actually speak Russian?" "You are in no position to question our partners," Vance shot back. "I am in a position to defend my work," Amara said. "You're accusing me of faking knowledge, but your experts seem to have missed that the Mandarin sample was a technical to poetic translation, a test of nuance. They missed that the Arabic sample intentionally blended modern standard with an Egyptian colloquial, a test of range. And they missed that the Russian insult was a direct, literal translation of a refugee's plea. Perhaps they prefer their poverty." "Polished?" "That is enough," Hawthorne roared, his face purpling. "This charade is over. Security." "On the contrary, Reginald," a new voice cut through the air, "I believe it is the only relevant question." Every head in the room turned. A man had stepped from the shadows by the elevators, a place Amara hadn't even realized was occupied. He was in his late 60s, with a sharp, intelligent face, and a suit that was elegant but worn, as if he lived in it. He walked calmly into the room, past Amara, and set a worn leather briefcase on the sacred mahogany table. The blood drained from Reginald Hawthorne's face. "Eris," he breathed, as if he'd seen a ghost. We weren't expecting you." "Clearly," the man said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "Dr. Eris Thorne. Grayson Fellow, 1983. I apologize for my lateness, gentlemen. The traffic from D.C. was dreadful. The arrival of Dr. Eris Thorne shifted the very atmosphere of the room. The power, once consolidated entirely at Hawthorne's end of the table, had now fractured. Thorne was status. He was one of the Foundation's first and most celebrated success stories. A career diplomat, a former ambassador, a man whose name was whispered in the halls of the State Department. He was not just an alumnus, he was a legend. He was the living embodiment of the Foundation's entire purpose. Hawthorne's power came from his name. Thorne's power came from his work. Hawthorne, who had wielded his power like a bludgeon, was now forced into the fawning, solicitous role of a host, straightening his tie. "Eris, my goodness, had we known, we would have held the session." "Nonsense, Reginald," Thorne said, dismissing the pleasantry with a wave of his hand. He turned his sharp, blue-eyed gaze on Cynthia Vance, who looked as if she'd swallowed a wasp. Her entire, carefully constructed execution had just been interrupted. "I am on the Emeritus Board, as you know. I make it a point to read the finalist files. This one," he nodded, not at Amara, but at her file in front of Vance, "intrigued me." His eyes scanned the board. It had no polish. It had no pedigree. It had no letters from senators or a summer internship at Goldman. All it had was raw, undeniable, terrifying talent. The one thing this board is supposed to be looking for and is constitutionally incapable of recognizing. He looked around the table, his gaze lingering on each board member, forcing them to meet his eye. Which is why I must say, gentlemen, ladies, I am deeply familiar with Miss Okoro's work. If Hawthorne had seen a ghost before, he was now looking at a firing squad. Mr. Al-Jamil sat up straighter, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Mrs. Harrington looked confused. Vance sputtered, "Dr. Thorne, I don't understand. Her samples. Our partners. They found them." "Your partners, Cynthia," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a cold, precise tenor, "are incompetent. Or worse, they are liars." He snapped the clasps on his briefcase. The snick-snick sound was like gunfire in the silent room. "I've been in diplomacy for 40 years. My entire life depends on the quality of a translation. I've seen good, bad, and catastrophic. And the work of Alpha Polyglot is some of the best I have ever seen." He pulled out a slim file. "For the past year, I have been using an anonymous freelance portal to find raw talent for unclassified UN reports. 6 months ago, I found a translator, Alpha Polyglot, whose work was extraordinary, nuanced, fast, and culturally precise." He slid a document across the table to Hawthorne. It was a humanitarian needs assessment from a refugee camp, stamped with the official insignia of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. This report on Syrian refugees, which secured $3 million in aid, was based on Alpha Polyglot's Arabic to English translation. This trade brief from our Beijing office, her Mandarin. This asylum plea from a Russian dissident, her Russian. Thorne elaborated, his voice cutting. That Russian plea? The State Department had rejected it as incoherent. Alpha Polyglot's translation, the one your expert called an insult, revealed the man wasn't incoherent. He was quoting dissident poetry from the 1960s, a code. It saved his life. That is the work you are judging. He finally turned to Amara, and for the first time, a small, kind smile touched his lips. "It took some doing, Miss Okoro, but I tracked you down. You were Client A, were you not? The one who was always so demanding about source context? Is this for a legal brief or a news report? The tone is completely different." Amara's mind flashed. Client A, the anonymous demanding client who paid twice the going rate and always asked impossible, brilliant questions about dialect and tone. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "I was." "I see," Thorne said. "Well, I am Dr. Eris Thorne, and I am here to attest, under oath if necessary, that your work is not just competent. It is exceptional. It is, in fact, the most promising new talent I have seen in my entire career." The silence was absolute. Cynthia Vance was visibly pale, her evidence folders looking like children's toys on the massive table. Hawthorne's face was a mask of utter, frozen shock. He was trapped. To deny Thorne was to deny the Foundation's greatest living icon. "Reginald," Thorne said, his voice soft again. "What exactly is the problem here?" Hawthorne, for the first time, looked small. He cleared his throat, his hand trembling slightly. "Eris, this is new information. The allegations from our partners, they are very specific. They represent billions in assets. Their word, it stands." "Then let's look at them," Thorne said, pulling up a chair. "No," Hawthorne said, finding his footing. This was his room. "We, the board, must convene in private. We must verify this new testimony. We must discuss." He stood up, a signal of dismissal. "Miss Okoro, you will wait in the anteroom." Amara nodded, her heart hammering. She was escorted by a silent security guard, not as a finalist, but as a prisoner. The guard's hand was firm on her elbow. As she walked past the small, glass-walled gallery for visitors, her eyes scanned the few people there, board assistants, a couple of observers. And her heart stopped. An elderly woman with a kind, wrinkled face and hair pulled back in a severe bun was sitting in the front row. She watched Amara pass, and as their eyes met, the woman's face broke into a fierce, proud smile. She pressed her hand to the glass and mouthed 2 words. "I'm here, moya dorogaya." My darling. It was Mrs. Petrova, her first Russian teacher, the librarian who had started it all. She was holding a cell phone, and she was not alone. Behind her sat a sharp-looking woman in a suit and a young man with a laptop, both watching the boardroom door with grim, focused intensity. The anteroom was as cold and impersonal as the boardroom, but without the pretense of luxury. It was a white box with 4 chairs, a water cooler, and a single dead plant. Amara's pro bono advisor, a nervous young lawyer from the Foundation's legal department named Mr. Davies, was pacing and muttering about procedural irregularities. He had been silent in the boardroom, and now he was useless, wringing his hands. "This is a disaster, Miss Okoro," he whispered, "contradicting a board member, bringing in him. Hawthorne is furious." The door hissed open. Amara stood, expecting the guard. Instead, Mrs. Petrova bustled in, her face flushed with indignation. "They put you in here? Like a criminal? Neuimoverno? Unbelievable!" "Mrs. Petrova." Amara felt a wave of relief so strong her knees buckled. "I thought you were in Moscow." "I was," the old woman said, wrapping Amara in a hug that smelled of paper, tea, and strong soap. "I was visiting my sister, but I saw your name on the finalist list online. I knew what this place was. I knew what they would do, so I flew back, and I brought friends." 2 people followed her into the room, and Mr. Davies looked up in alarm. The first was a young man, early 20s, with a laptop bag slung over his shoulder and an intense look in his eyes. The second was a woman, sharp, impeccably dressed in a dark blue suit, who radiated a confidence that made Cynthia Vance look like an amateur. "You can't be in here," Davies squeaked. "This is a private deliberation." The woman in the suit handed him a business card. "I am Imani Shah, Esquire," she said, her voice a cool, steady baritone. "I am Miss Okoro's new counsel. You can either sit down, Mr. Davies, or you can be an exhibit. Your choice." Davies sat. "Amara," Mrs. Petrova said, making the introductions. "This is Ben Carter. He used to come to my language club at the library. He never said a word, just sat in the corner with his computer. Turns out he's some kind of digital wizard." "Cybersecurity analyst, ma'am," Ben corrected, smiling. He shook Amara's hand. "Mrs. P called me 2 days ago. Said you were walking into a lion's den and asked if I could check the locks. She was right. The locks are rotten." Imani Shah stepped forward. "I grew up in the Ridges too, Amara. I went to Northwood Public. Now I'm a partner at a civil rights firm downtown. Mrs. Petrova," she nodded to the librarian, "has been my client for 2 years. We've been investigating." Amara looked between the 3 of them. "Investigating what?" "This," Imani said, her voice low and serious. "The Grayson Foundation and its partners." Mrs. Petrova noticed a pattern. Every year, brilliant kids from neighborhoods like the Ridges would get to the final rounds of these big scholarships, and then they would be disqualified. Plagiarism. Fabricated essays. Behavioral issues. Always something. "It smelled," Mrs. Petrova added, "like prejudice." Ben Carter opened his laptop. "So I started digging. Legally," he added with a wink. "Public-facing APIs, web archives, disgruntled employee reviews, global strategies, the ones who called your Mandarin unintelligible." "Yes?" "They have an internal HR keyword filter. I found a reference to it in their own public developer log. It's not even a good bot. Resumes with zip codes from the Ridges and 4 other low-income areas are auto-flagged for low-priority review. That means the hiring manager, the one who actually speaks Mandarin, He never even saw your file. Your translation was rejected by an HR script called Zip Code Courtroom Blacklist, TXT. They didn't even try to hide it. Amara felt a cold, hard knot of validation form in her stomach. The Diplomatic Institute is even worse. Imani Shah took over, her voice sharp as a scalpel. They don't use bots, they use people. They maintain 2 internal tracks for applicants. A preferred track for candidates from their 20 designated feeder schools, Andover, Exeter, the like, and a diversity track for everyone else. Let me guess, Amara said. The diversity track is graded on an entirely different, impossible rubric, Imani finished. We have 3 sworn affidavits from former employees who quit over it. They call it managing expectations. We have another plaintiff, a John Doe, a brilliant coder from your district, disqualified for plagiarism. The code? It was his own open-source project. We call it institutional racism. Amara finally sat down. And the World Aid Initiative, the insult to the language. Mrs. Petrova sat next to her face sad. Ah, Dorogaya. That one was the most painful. They rejected your Russian translation of a refugee's asylum plea. You translated it literally, word for word. You kept the raw, desperate, ungrammatical emotion. You told the truth, and they wanted it polished, Amara whispered, understanding. They gave it to an Ivy League intern, Ben said, pulling up another file. An intern who cleaned it up to sound more academic. Here's your translation. God help us, we are starving. The children are sick. We need medicine. Here's his. The community is experiencing food scarcity and requires medical assistance. The result? The asylum request was denied by the board for lack of clear and present urgency. You didn't fail the translation, Amara. You were too accurate. And the expert who called your translation an insult, Imani said. We ran a check. He's a major donor to the initiative. He's also the intern's uncle, and according to his own public bio, the only language he speaks other than English is passable golf course Spanish. Amara closed her eyes. It wasn't incompetence. It was a system. A gated, guarded, reinforced system designed to keep her out, and she had just threatened to tear it down. Amara, Imani said, placing a hand on her shoulder. This isn't just about your scholarship anymore. We are filing a class action lawsuit against the Grayson Foundation and its partners for discriminatory practices. We are filing this afternoon. You are our lead plaintiff. Dr. Thorne is blowing the whistle from the inside, Ben added. This is it. We had the ammunition. We just needed the tank. And you just rolled into their boardroom. You did all this in 2 days? Amara asked, her voice awed. No, Dorogaya, Mrs. Petrova said, patting her hand. 2 years. Your name just lit the fuse. The door hissed open. The security guard was back. Mr. Hawthorne will see you now. Amara stood up. She was no longer a finalist. She was no longer a victim. She was a witness. When Amara re-entered the boardroom, the atmosphere was thick with ice. Dr. Thorne was now seated at the table, a king in exile, his briefcase open. Hawthorne, back in his chair, looked pinched and furious. Cynthia Vance looked as if she were seconds from being physically ill. Dr. Thorne, Hawthorne said, his voice strained with forced politeness. We have considered your documents. We appreciate your personal insight. However, they do not erase the specific, documented complaints from our corporate partners. These are billion-dollar organizations. Their word is evidence. The Foundation stands by their assessment. It was a bluff, a desperate, last-ditch play to reclaim authority. Then let us address those assessments, shall we? Thorne replied, his voice dangerously smooth. Cynthia, you mentioned Global Strategies found the Mandarin unintelligible. Who exactly was the reviewer? Our liaison, Vance stammered, shuffling papers. Mr. Harris. He handles the preliminary internship files. Excellent. Thorne tapped the speakerphone button on the conference unit in the center of the table. Because I took the liberty of contacting Mr. Harris during our recess. A dial tone, a click. A nervous, reedy voice filled the room. Hello? Mr. Harris, Thorne said, his voice calm and surgical. Dr. Eris Thorne here, from the Grayson Emeritus Board. You're on speaker with the full board. Can you please confirm your review of finalist Amara Okoro's file? Yes. Yes, I flagged it, Harris's voice squeaked. It seemed problematic. Problematic, Thorne repeated. Help me understand, Mr. Harris. I'm just a simple old man. What was problematic about it? The language. It didn't look right. It was flagged by the system. And do you speak, read, or understand any dialect of Mandarin, Mr. Harris? The silence on the line stretched for 5, 10, 15 seconds. Mr. Harris? No, the voice finally whispered. No, I don't. Then why flag it? It was protocol. The zip code. It's a high-risk area. I was just following protocol. A protocol for filtering applicants from certain zip codes? Thorne pressed. Click. Harris had hung up. Well, Thorne said into the silence. This is an ambush, Hawthorne roared, slamming his fist on the table. The water glasses jumped. This is a setup. This is a conspiracy. This is your doing, Eris. You were always the ungrateful one, the charity case who thought he was better than us. Evidence, Mr. Hawthorne. A new voice. The main doors to the boardroom swung open. Imani Shaw had entered, followed by Ben Carter, who was wheeling a projector cart. A startled security guard grabbed her arm. Ma'am, you can't. Imani held up a court order. This is a cease and desist, Mr. Hawthorne, and an invitation to a press conference. Or you can sit down, and we can present our findings. Your choice. Hawthorne looked at the door, at his security, but they were frozen, unsure. This was outside their pay grade. He was trapped. He nodded once, sharply. Ben Carter aimed the projector at a blank white wall, and an image flared to life. It was an email. This, Ben's voice cut through, clear and technical, is an internal memo from a global strategies VP, obtained via a whistleblower. I quote, "We need to manage the optics. Flag all non-target applicants for quality review before they get to the specialists. We can't have kids from the ridges representing us in Beijing. Quality them out. We can't risk it." A wave of sickness rolled through Amara. It was real. All her paranoia, all her fears. It was all real. "This is outrageous," Vance said, finding her voice. "What about the Diplomatic Institute? You can't. That's a respected institution that practices systematic discrimination," Imani Shaw said, not even looking at Vance. She nodded to Ben. The image on the wall changed. It was a spreadsheet, 2 columns, preferred and diversity. The Institute's 2-track system, Imani explained calmly. We have affidavits from 3 former graders. Preferred files from schools like Andover and Exeter were graded on content. Diversity files were graded on a separate punitive rubric. Any split infinitive, any colloquialism, any tone mismatch, an automatic failure. 94% of diversity track applicants fail. 100% of preferred track applicants pass the first round. A statistical impossibility, Mr. Hawthorne. To use your own words. Hawthorne was ashen. He was witnessing the public live broadcast execution of his foundation's reputation. Then, Mrs. Petrova stood up from the gallery. She was just an old woman in a floral dress, but her presence commanded the room. "Mr. Hawthorne," her voice was shaking, not with fear, but with a lifetime of fury. "My name is Elena Petrova. For 15 years, I ran a free language club at the Northwood Library. I taught Amara Okoro. I taught her Russian. I taught her German. I taught her French. She learned in 2 years what your preferred students, with their $10,000 tutors, failed to master in 6. She is a genius. She pointed a trembling finger at him. You, Mrs. Harrington, you donate to the ballet. Do you know what this girl's mind is? It is a symphony, and you tried to silence it. You are not judging competence today. You are judging your own spectacular, suffocating prejudice. This meeting is over, Hawthorne choked out, fumbling for his gavel. This is... Not yet. Amara's voice. It was the first time she had spoken since returning. Every head turned. She had moved from the end of the table to its center, the sound of her $30 heels clicking on the marble. She stood directly opposite Hawthorne. Her fear was gone. Her weariness was gone. All that was left was the cold, dense core of her anger, now refined into a diamond-hard point. You asked me to demonstrate, she said. I will. She turned, not to Hawthorne, but to Cynthia Vance. You said my Arabic was flawed, a grotesque misunderstanding of formal tone. What exactly was the error? Vance, trapped, flipped frantically through her notes. The review said it confused modern standard Arabic with a street dialect. It confused modern standard Arabic with the Egyptian colloquial Daalik, Amara corrected her. I used both intentionally. The sample text was a dialogue between a news anchor and a street vendor. Did your expert not realize that? She turned her gaze down the table to the silent board member, Mr. Al-Jamil. Mr. Al-Jamil, your foundation does work in Cairo, does it not? He looked up, startled to be addressed. Yes, we do. Amara paused, and then the air changed. A new language filled the room, not the polite, academic Arabic of a textbook, but the fast, warm, flowing sound of a Cairo street. She asked him a complex, polite question about his foundation's work in the Al-Darb Al-Amar district. Al-Jamil's eyes went wide. He stared. Then, slowly, a smile of pure, shocked delight spread across his face. He answered her in kind, a brief, stunned, joyful exchange. He turned to Hawthorne, all pretense of impartiality gone. Reginald, he said, his voice thick. She is not just fluent. She is from there. I have not heard an accent that precise since I left my grandfather's house. Amara didn't wait. She turned to the severe-looking German board member, Dr. Kessler. Dr. Kessler, your biography states you are an expert on Goethe. She then spoke in perfect academic German, quoting a complex passage from Faust and asking a question about its philosophical implications. The woman's jaw dropped. She turned to a Japanese attaché in the visitors' gallery who had come to observe. She offered him a complex, formal greeting in flawless Japanese, complete with the correct keigo, and asked a question about the trade delegation. He stood, instinctively, and bowed deeply in return, answering her with profound respect. Spanish, French, Swahili. She moved from one to the next, her voice, her accent, her very posture changing with each. A line of perfect Castilian Spanish to one board member. A rapid-fire, passionate burst of French directed at Vance, who clearly didn't understand a word. A warm, musical Swahili greeting to Imani, who smiled back. It wasn't a party trick. It was a transformation. And then, Russian. She faced Mrs. Petrova. She didn't recite a poem. She spoke from the heart. Elena, she said in flawless, emotional Russian, you gave me the world when they told me I deserved nothing. You gave me books when they gave me statistics. You taught me that a new language is a new soul. Thank you. Spasibo bolshoye. Mrs. Petrova was crying openly, tears of pride streaming down her face. Finally, Amara turned back to Hawthorne. "And Mandarin." That was beautiful. A new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. An elegant, middle-aged Asian man was standing there, his coat still damp from the rain. Dr. Thorne stood up, smiling. "Ah, Mr. Chen, delighted you could make it." "Dr. Thorne, I apologize. My flight from Shanghai was delayed." He walked directly to Amara, ignoring everyone else, and bowed. "Miss Okoro, I am Michael Chen, CEO of Global Strategies, Asia-Pacific Division." He turned to Hawthorne, his face hardening. "I came when I heard, via Dr. Thorne, what my American counterparts had done. My Beijing office reviewed your translation sample this morning. It was not unintelligible. It was the finest piece of technical to poetic brand translation I have seen in a decade. The errors your expert flagged, they were high-level cultural nuances that, frankly, I didn't think anyone outside of our top team would even understand." He faced Amara again. "The internship is yours, and a full-time job when you graduate, along with my company's most profound and public apology." He then looked at Hawthorne. "And my American division will be restructured. Our partnership with this foundation, Mr. Hawthorne, is under immediate review. We do not tolerate this. It is bad for business. Total, absolute, soul-crushing silence." Cynthia Vance was no longer pale. She was gray. She quietly, methodically, began packing her leather binder into her briefcase. The click of her pen, the snap of the binder, the zip of the bag, not a word. A silent, total surrender. Her career at the Grayson Foundation was over. Reginald Hawthorne was ashen. He was a living portrait of his own ancestors on the wall. Stiff, proud, and utterly terrifyingly obsolete. His entire world, his entire system of how things are done, had been dismantled in front of him by a 17-year-old girl from the Ridges. He looked at the portrait of his grandfather, as if for help. It stared back, unmoved. His personal assistant, a young man who had been hovering by the door, leaned in and whispered something in his ear. Ben Carter, from his laptop, spoke up. "He's right, Mr. Hawthorne. My live stream just hit 50,000 viewers. The Times and the Post are both in the lobby. You should probably smile." "The board," Hawthorne whispered, his voice a dry leaf. "The board will reconvene in private?" "No." Imani Shah's voice was final. "The bylaws, Section 4, Paragraph 2. A vote must be called on the fellowship, now. Or this entire meeting is invalid, and the press will love that. The vote will be public record." Dr. Eris Thorne stood. "I am the emeritus representative. I second the motion." Hawthorne looked cornered. He had no moves left. "A vote for the fellowship. All in favor of... He couldn't say her name. "All in favor of awarding the 2025 Grayson Global Fellowship to Miss Amara Okoro," Mr. Al-Jamil said, his voice ringing with pride. He raised his hand high. "Aye," Dr. Kessler, the German woman. "Aye," the junior member who had been ashamed. "Aye." One by one, every hand went up. Even Mrs. Harrington, the woman with the pearls, whispered a faint, "Aye." It was unanimous. Hawthorne, his face a mask of defeat, looked at Amara. "The Grayson Global Fellowship is awarded to Miss Amara Okoro." Amara stood in the center of the room, the focus of all that power, all that money. She looked at the faces, shocked, proud, defeated. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear. She looked directly at Reginald Hawthorne. "I'm not sure I'll accept." That was the moment the world truly shifted. That was the sound of the foundations cracking. They had been voting on whether she was worthy of them. They had never considered that they might not be worthy of her. Hawthorne looked as if she had physically struck him. "This fellowship," Amara said, "is tainted. It's built on a system that you, Mr. Hawthorne, just proved is broken." She turned to Dr. Thorne and Mr. Chen. "But I will accept the internship, and I will be the lead plaintiff in Miss Shaw's lawsuit." She turned back to the board. "And I will accept the fellowship money on one condition. It is to be managed by a new, independent committee, headed by Dr. Thorne and Miss Shaw, to find and fund the other candidates you disqualified." She looked at Reginald Hawthorne one last time, not with anger, but with a kind of pity. "You built this room to keep people like me out. You just invited me in to tear it down." She turned and walked, not to the anteroom, but to the main elevators. She nodded once to Mrs. Petrova, a shared victory. She nodded once to Imani, a professional acknowledgement. She walked past Hawthorne without a glance. The great glass doors hissed open, reflecting her image against the glittering Concord skyline. And then they hissed shut. The setting sun streams through the tall, arched windows of the Northwood Library, catching the dust motes dancing over the new computer terminals and the rows of brand-new books. It has been a year. The Okoro Language Institute, funded by the Landmark Settlement with the Grayson Foundation, fills the entire second floor. The air smells of new carpet and fresh ink, and is filled with the quiet murmur of a dozen different languages. Amara Okoro, home for the holidays from her new post in Beijing, sits at a small, circular table. Across from her, a 14-year-old girl from the Ridges stares at a textbook. "It's Arabic," the girl whispers. "It looks impossible." Amara smiles. She slides the book over. "It's just sounds. Listen." She says a word, warm and round. The girl repeats it clumsily. Amara nods. Again. Slower. You're already starting. Outside, the city of towers and boardrooms hums with a power that no longer feels impossibly distant. Amara had faced them, not with a weapon, but with a truth they could not silence. She had learned the world's languages to speak to it, only to find her most powerful words were in defense of her own. The scholarship was just money. This, the passing of a key, was the true inheritance. The revolution had begun, not with a bang, but with a new conversation in 9 languages, and it was getting louder.